Thank you for joining us today in the room and online. So we have quite a busy program today and learning about the cultural tourism in North Queensland of Australia, Far North Queensland, Cairns especially. And our program today will start with the opening speech by our Dean, Professor Stephen Boyle from Dean of College of Business Law and Governance. And then Mali Ingram, who is the Business Development Officer in Indigenous Tourism from Queensland Government, will talk to us about Indigenous Cultural Tourism Development in Queensland, and he will focus on the Year of Indigenous Tourism. Then we'll have a brief lunch and introduction to an activity that participants online can do in that time. And that will be followed by the panel discussion on the tourism as a regenerative tool, and we'll hear from three panelists. Unfortunately, Professor Henrietta Marie will not be able to make it today, so Carl Fourmile from Minjal will come to talk to us about his work in promoting the culture in the region. And then we'll have Crag Carttling from from Jebel Bina Aboriginal Corporation, where he's Indigenous Tourism Development Facilitator, and Marcus Brady, who is a Sales and Marketing Manager at Mandingal by Indigenous Tours. And then we can discuss the ideas on developing new regenerative tourism offerings post-pandemic. Okay. Right. So I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners on the land on which we meet, which is the Yiriganji people, and also the traditional custodians of broader Cairns region, the Yidinji people and Jabogai people. And we want to pay our respects to elders past, present, and emerging, and acknowledge their continuous contribution to enriching our university community and the broader Cairns community. And of course, for the topic of cultural tourism, it would not be possible if not for the ongoing knowledge and sharing of culture between the traditional owners and us, the rest of the community. And to this, I would like to hand over to Professor Stephen Boyle to say a few words to us. Over to you, Stephen.
Thank you, Dennis, and thanks everybody. Welcome to this workshop. It's hopefully you have a very enjoyable, very productive, very active session today. I see that there's some very interesting and useful sessions that are about to occur, and I think Indigenous cultural tourism is an important component of many aspects of our lives, whether that's about the sort of sustainability of Indigenous culture. It has an educational aspect to it as people engage in through tourism in engaging with Indigenous cultures. It helps with education of people from different cultures. It helps also to foster understanding and celebrate diversity, and hopefully also assist in the path as we continue along the path of reconciliation here in Australia, that we're able to engage in very, very productive sort of tourism and cultural activities that are beneficial for both the Indigenous communities, young and old, and also for those that are visiting and wanting to learn more. And I think for me, the other aspect of this sort of cultural tourism is the sustainability of the culture. So the culture is sustained, it's then handed down to different generations, and so it continues to grow and develop and be sustained, and also allows for those sort of authentic experiences. And I think the other sort of plank in the Indigenous culture space is that of authenticity, and ensuring that the sorts of experiences that we either engage in or are being provided have that continuous authentic approach, and that people are able to engage in a very, very authentic way and continue that sustainability. So these conversations are really important. And I look forward to hearing more about some of the outcomes of your workshops. And I know that I'm taking up too much time, so I'm going to hand back to Dennis and let him get underway with the actual workshop. So well done, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Boyle, for this introduction. And now we will continue with our program. And the first speaker is Mr. Mali Ingram. As I mentioned, Mali is a Business Development Officer for Indigenous Tourism Development at Queensland's Government's Department of Tourism, Innovation and Sport. And prior to joining the state government, Mali has also worked in Torres Strait Islands for Torres Strait Island Authority, and also worked for TRACS, which is a community development organization based out in Kuranda. Okay,
Great.
Over to you.
Thank you. Thanks, Dennis, and Stephen for the introduction. Really like to thank JCU and Dennis for inviting us along to be able to speak today. Gureng Bungang, good morning. My name's Mali Ingram, a Gimoy Wallabari Yidinji man, and that was my greeting in our traditional language for hello and good morning. I too would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land that we meet here today, and the neighbouring clans that encompass Cairns. So the Yirraganji people to the north, the Jabbergai in the rainforest, and the Gimoy Wallabari Yidinji people in Cairns. I also want to pay acknowledgement to the Gunganji mob over at Yarrabah as well, as there's some really close affiliation with all of those tribal links. So yeah, just paying my respects to their elders, past, present, future, and emerging. Okay, so look, I've been invited today just to give a little bit of a, and I just want to say hello to all of our international guests as well, and thank you for joining online. Pay respect to your cultures and your people as well. All right, so you'll see on the slide at the moment, we've got up the Indigenous Tourism in Queensland Year of Indigenous Tourism Impact Report. So this was an initiative that was brought around in 2020 from the Palaszczuk Government to invest in Indigenous tourism development and try to increase the participation of not only Indigenous people, but non-Indigenous people in displaying our culture and products across the state and across the nation. There was a $10 million grant, or $10 million worth of funding that came through in 2020. I'll just move on to the next slide. Yeah, so a grant funding of $10 million was provided for the Year of Indigenous Tourism. $7 million of that went to a Growing Indigenous Tourism in Queensland fund that 33 proponents were successful in obtaining. And we had two sections of categories for that funding. So it was a category 1, funding for up to $25,000 grants to look at business plans, business cases, feasibility studies. And then a category 2 funding, which was worth up to $1 million to look at larger infrastructure or asset purchases for product development. 17 of those 33 proponents were in the far north from Townsville up to the Torres Straits and out west. And the rest were down from Townsville all the way through the rest of Queensland to the southeast Queensland border. Out of that funding as well, so $7 million was out of the Growing Indigenous Tourism Fund. $3 million of that then went into other initiatives to support the growth and development of the Indigenous tourism sector and businesses. And some funding was awarded to the Regional Tourism Office, Regional Tourism Organisation here, Tourism Tropical North Queensland, and then through the Queensland Tourism Industry Council as well, to support different initiatives around marketing, business development, and mentoring as well, and marketing as well. So it was a great, I guess, a great investment from the Queensland Government to recognise the importance of Indigenous tourism to the tourism sector, and tried to drive that with the intentions, and I'll touch on that a bit later, around the 2032 Olympics over this next 10 years, before and after. So yeah, the slide that you're looking at now just sort of outlines a bit of the investment that was made to our different partners. Tourism Events Queensland, which is the statewide regional tourism organisation that looks after all of those localised RTOs and LTOs that are available. And I will share this this slide with everybody as well, so you're able to have a look at it. There will be some interaction in there and some links as well that will be important for you. Obviously, we've only got a short sort of time slot, so I won't try to take up all your time with all of that. But I think it was really important to understand, and Stephen mentioned the pathway to treaty and the role that Indigenous tourism can play here in Australia for that. So it does tick off on a lot of different boxes for the Queensland Government. But ultimately, at the end of the day, what we want to see is thriving Indigenous tourism product and businesses. I'm just wondering if this slide will work. So yeah, this one just outlines a bit more of that $10 million investment and the initiatives that we supported. So there was 40 initiatives through the Year of Indigenous Tourism, and I did mention a couple of them around Tourism Tropical North Queensland funding, TEQ, and the like. And I'm just wondering if I can play, as part of the Year of Indigenous Tourism, we did have a video that came up, but I don't know if it's on this slide. I don't think it works. It's fine. But you'll be able to see that in the other version, and give you an opportunity to look at that. One of the key parts that was supported as well was an Indigenous-led tourism advocacy body, so a peak body for tourism, and there was two that the Queensland Government supported over this time. So the Queensland's First Nations Tourism Council, and then the Independent Indigenous Tourism Operators of Queensland, so ITOC. And these bodies are quite important because they are driven from the ground up by Indigenous operators and mature businesses that are working in the sector. And really what that does is just provide a voice from the tourism sector to advocate on its behalf to local government, national government, and the wider community. This slide here just shows a bit of the impact that funding had. So we were able to, through the Year of Indigenous Tourism, support 496 participants in various mentoring capability programs and coaching. The Tourism Tropical North Queensland Cluster Group was established as well. So this was made up separate to Tourism Tropical North Queensland, who facilitated it, the RTO, but it is an independent body, Tropical North Queensland Cluster Group, made up of all of the different businesses and stakeholders that play a part in the tourism sector. And that's growing now from 168 just within the last 6 months to 316. So it is gaining a lot of momentum, and it's just another way for voice here in Far North Queensland to be able to advocate on behalf of the operator. And obviously share ideas and link in with all your different local, state and federal government agencies and all of the other enablers that are available here in Australia. Some key ones out of the Category 1 and Category 2 funding. There was 24 of those proponents that received capability money or capability capacity building money, which was those $25,000 grants, and they're almost all finished now. There's only about 2 left over the last year to finalise, which is a great result. Now that just positions those businesses, positions them well to then secure further funding for their business ideas. Category 2, like I said, that was up to $1 million worth of funding. And all of this information is public information as well. So that's available to everybody, and I can share those links and you can see what that money was used for and who it was allocated to. And I'll have a bit of a case study further on down in the slides. Again, these are just some of the stats of where the money was funded and used, and the types of support that was given from the Tourism and Indigenous Fund, Growing Indigenous Tourism Fund, Communications, Marketing, Education, Employment, Destination Support, Festivals and Events, Experience Design as well. And again, like I said, we'll be able to share this and it may be useful for you. Okay, so I work with the Our Country Advisory Service as part of the Department of Tourism, Innovation and Sport. And it's around Indigenous Tourism Development. And we've created a framework over the last year and a half that we use to support businesses and to provide some guidance about what it is to be successful and how you need to reach that success through these 10 sectorial needs. So it's really wrapped around your connectivity, supply, and then demand. And then we will link in with all of those different organisations and entities that support that development at those different stages. So we at the moment have across the state 220 different businesses or aspiring businesses that we work with and support. About 140 of those are here in tropical North Queensland, and then further up to the Torres Straits and out west to the Mount Isa border, or out to the, NT border. So we use this particular model to help support them, assess, identify where their needs lie, whether they've been operating for a significant amount of time or it's really at the concept stage. We will then assess that and wrap the necessary support, whether it be in-house through the Our Country Advisory Service, which has 3 offices across the state, myself here in North Queensland, 1 in Central Queensland and 1 in Southeast Queensland. Then we also have a director, and this is all under the Department of Tourism, and a product of what has happened out of the Year of Indigenous Tourism and the continual funding now that the state, and the importance that the state sees in Indigenous tourism. So we have 5 different business growth areas: trial open, visitor ready, market ready, trade ready, and then your aspirational piece. And for a lot of our businesses, this is where they are. They're sitting at that aspirational phase, which just takes a lot of work from concept to building the business, your business governance, business planning, all of those types of, the beginnings of any particular business that needs to be done is all happening within that aspirational phase. So we have a lot of businesses that are moving through there. It may not be moving straight into trial open, but they are moving along our business continuum, and then meeting all of those sectorial needs. So collective effort from an Indigenous perspective is making sure that you're securing those particular rights, and having the conversation with your landowners that you may be wanting to use for your product, and then stories and culture that you're going to share. So you need to have the necessary cultural authority provided to you to make sure that all of those boxes, and you've got the support of your community to go and then deliver that. It makes it a lot easier at the other end, and where disputes may happen because you're using a particular story or accessing a piece of land that wasn't discussed and approved. So I'll let you see all of those sectorial needs. It really then leads into the demand space, which is the consumer readiness. And that's where we want to see our businesses over this next 2-year period, in preparation then for the 2032 Olympics. And I'm not sure if we'll have some questions at the end, and time for some questions as well, guys. So just write those down if you'd like to, and then be happy to answer those. So at the time of this development of the report, and the numbers do change every day. This is just what the OCAS, the Our Country Advisory Service, impact has been during the Year of Indigenous Tourism. So it's around that 211 businesses that we support. We do have 260 on there, but some of those are made up of enablers, supporters for those businesses. 93% of those 196 Indigenous owned business, so 93% of them are Indigenous owned. And we also, like I said, have those 30 to 35 industry enablers, which is really important because you do need the support of not only your government, but also the sector itself. So the non-Indigenous sector and those that are already operating in that space. And we have some really clear examples here in the north of well-functioning businesses that are willing to engage with our Indigenous operators. There's a couple of names that might be familiar to some of those in the room here on the right, just around who some of those businesses are. And we've got a really clear breakdown as well of what we don't just deal in the attraction space or the experience space of the tourism industry. We work across the whole industry. So whether that be hospitality, arts, things even as transport as well, transport and logistics. So we work in that whole space to support the whole industry. Okay. We don't need that slide. Again, this is just some other links that I've already really discussed about during the presentation. But again, it's just useful information about how the Queensland Government's invested and what they're investing in. All right, one of the case studies. So I'll move on to that now. And one of the success stories is the Bonnier Bush University. So it's a GITQ Category 2 funded project that has been completed in April 2022 and was opened for use. And I guess one of the important things out of any investment from your government is wanting to see the impact that it has, but also the ongoing jobs. I guess it's around jobs, and I guess from the investment side, that's what you want to see. That it's ongoing, viable, and you're able to create employment opportunities for Indigenous people. So the Bonnier Bush University was a great example of taking the concept and plan, being supported through the Queensland Government and other enablers. And they really were self-determined at times and only leaned on the government when they required it. And they were at a different level of maturity. Obviously, being at a Category 2 funded, there was expectations around their maturity. So they were able to be fairly self-sufficient and self-directed. And lean on us for a little bit of support. But at the end of the day, opened up in April 2022. They've got tour guides trained, and they've got 2 ongoing jobs and obviously some construction work that happened out of it. So there's benefits, I guess, from your governments being able to invest in those products, and that may be important for our international audience as well. One of the next ones was one of the Category 1 funded. So that was around a strategic business plan for Nyanda Life, and some of you may be, some in the room here might know of Nyanda Life and the likes of Madonna Thompson, who's the chairperson of that Independent Indigenous Tourism Operators of Queensland, the ITOC. So one of the really key figures in the Indigenous tourism space in the Southeast Queensland corner. So again, it was just being able to get that agreement in place, release that funding round, and then support those that were successful to complete that and position them for future funding and future product and business development. Mon Repos as well was another Category 2 funded success story that has been completed, and they had a cafe. They went for a cafe. So Gigi, Mon Repos is around the turtle experience. So this was just an add-on to what was already existing in that space, and yeah, the Gigi Cafe now is open, and as you can see, it's employing almost up to 10 people there. So 5 people, sorry. And then having trained some of the youth. One Business, the One Business program is available through TAFE. So this is one of the initiatives that came out of the Year of Indigenous Tourism. And it really is a program that is there for mob-to-mob type sharing and learning. So they create an environment where you're able to get online, or they are doing face-to-face now that, that the COVID restrictions are finished, where mob are able to come together, share their ideas and build their experience from other business owners and operators. So it's been a really good program and been really well attended. And you're starting to see the results out of that. Now it is, like I said, it is funded through TAFE, delivered through TAFE, funded by the Queensland Government. And those numbers, I believe, I think there's been about 336 participants that have either engaged in the program, supported advice, or been on the webinars. So I encourage you to have a look at One Business and the slides once they're sent through. TEQ impact, again, that was just, we work very closely with Tourism and Events Queensland, which is the statutory body that looks after the promotion and marketing, in essence, the promotion and marketing for all of the tourism sector across Australia. And we did support an emerging Indigenous experience field school that happened last November here in Cairns, and it had about 15 participants from all over the state and different levels of business maturity, which was great because you had some aspirants and then you also had some mature operators, and there was some links and information sharing that was really, really beneficial for the aspiring business owners. Okay, so the TEQ impact, they're far-reaching, far wide. So they work heavily. Obviously, they're the statewide body for tourism promotion, and work closely with the likes of TTNQ, so Tourism Tropical North Queensland, and all of the other different RTOs across the state to help promote tourism, the tourism sector as a whole, to the state nationally and internationally. But there has been a real shift in focus now through the Year of Indigenous Tourism to highlight Indigenous tourism product, which is great from the buy-in from TEQ, and I guess another result of the investment that the Queensland Government has made to support Indigenous businesses. These were just some of the businesses that had engaged with the TEQ Transformational Experience Mentoring Program. So there is a lot of support out there. I should note that. And I think that's great from the government's perspective, is that they're wanting to support the industry and those operators. So some of these people will be familiar to those in the room here, the likes of Dalvan Cockatoo Collins, who was supported through that program and designed the medals for the Commonwealth Games back in 2018. I think Melbourne Gold by Yidinji Eco-Cultural Tours with Dwayne and Dale Mundraby, and we have a representative here today, Marcus Brady, and you'll be able to ask him some questions around how they've been able to move here in the tourism industry from their idea. Mossman Gorge, Wayne Walker and Walkabout Cultural Adventures. So there's some really, really good examples here in Far North of mob that are actually doing it and being successful. Yeah, this was the TTNQ impact, so through the state's investment. And I did touch on that the TNQ Indigenous Cluster Group had grown from 117 to 316 members, which has been really beneficial anecdotal information from the attendees about building networking, sharing ideas, content, and just supporting each other. Because ultimately, that's what makes a good tourism industry, is that you'll need to lean on all of your different partners and people that are available to you, and build really close partnerships with them. During the Year of Indigenous Tourism, there were 7 new operators that were launched. So again, this was between the years 2020 to 2021. It was extended for a year because of the pandemic. So there was an extra year of focus that was added to this, and it finished in December 2021. But yeah, again, Malden Gold Buy, straight charters, Myja tours down in Innisfail, Yaguli, hot air ballooning. So all of these types of businesses were launched through these support mechanisms. I'm just wondering if this video will play. Yes, that's a good video and a little bit of a segue into what's going to be discussed around transformational experiences and tourism. Seeing great and leaving greater. So that's really important. That'll probably come up a little bit in our panel discussion as well. But it's a really key aspect, I guess, when we're dealing with Indigenous cultures from my people up in the Torres Straits and all around Australia, is being able to, we have, the story's been told around the oldest living Indigenous culture, the oldest living culture. So being able to share those stories and provide that to your visitors just leaves them with an experience that they'll never forget, and a one of a kind. And Queensland's in a really unique position because it's the only place in the world that you'll be able to experience traditional Torres Strait Islander culture and Aboriginal culture at the same time. Okay, so where to from here? I guess it's the reshaping Queensland visitor economy to welcome the world. I've put up two links here. I'm just wondering if they'll work. So last year there was, can everybody see that? Is that good enough? It's probably a little bit, sorry.
You can zoom in a bit.
Zoom it in?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so last year there was a Queensland Tourism Industry Reference Panel that was established, and it was to look at an interim action plan and some recommendations to support tourism recovery after the pandemic. So there were 75 recommendations out of that paper, and I won't bore you with all of the 75, but the key ones to look at are on this slide here. So number 36, 37, 38, 39, 40, and this was all related to Indigenous tourism and First Nations experiences. Some of these recommendations have already been completed. One of those recommendations was completed around supporting the Indigenous tourism sector, and that was through the continuation of the Our Country Advisory Service, which I'm a part of, which is great. It just gives some confidence to the relationships that have been built now, and you have dedicated officers that are there to support the industry and those operators. But you'll see there, out of these recommendations, this is what the Queensland Government is wanting to work towards. And ensuring then for the greater goal of the 2032 Olympics, where we will have a captive market of millions that will be travelling here, and then wanting to experience what not only Queensland but Australia has on offer. But obviously we'd like to keep them in Queensland as long as we can. Great. That really concludes my slides for today. Everybody, I'd really like to thank you for your time, and I guess open it up to the floor if there's any particular questions that anyone would like to ask about Year of Indigenous Tourism, or any of those reports and what the focus is moving forward.
Thank you, Mali. Anyone has questions?
Mali, just thank you. It's fantastic, mate. Just in terms of that 211 figure, the number of Indigenous tourism experiences and services you guys are supporting, it's fantastic. When you look at the breakup of all the regions in Queensland, obviously Tropical North Queensland is kind of got the lion's share of those experiences and tourism services, which is great. In terms of the target, I know there's an action plan that's been developed, across the whole region, Tropical North Queensland. In terms of sort of stretch targets, even to 2025, I think when that plan is looking at that next sort of 3-year period.
Yep.
Just in terms of revenue targets or job targets, are they known targets, or do we have appreciation for how much revenue the current industry is worth to the economy, and perhaps what are we trying to achieve where we would be in the next few years?
Yeah, thank you for that, Marcus. Yeah, look, there are some ideas and I guess some preliminary thinking around it, but nothing that's set in concrete yet. Not for what I guess what the goals are or targets for the next 3 years, and that action plan is still to be finalised and then released. So there is still some thinking around it, but it's not set in concrete yet. For any targets, I guess in terms of the revenue, that will be included as well. I guess a really good example too is a recent piece in the paper, the Cairns Post, that was really, I think maybe a couple of days ago with Dwayne and Dale from Tuesday's paper, just acknowledging the amount of spend and I guess the importance of tourism in tropical North Queensland. With about 3.12 billion spent in this last little period. There's been a real boom here with visitation, and anecdotally you can see it when you're walking through the streets if you're here in Cairns and across the beaches and further up to the Daintree. So yeah, look, if we can sort of capitalise on those numbers, we'll probably be able to recover fairly quickly. But yeah, look, that would be an anomaly, but yes, that will be part of the goals and what comes out of this plan. It's a really good point too, that the tourism, the Tropical North Cluster, tourism Tropical North Queensland are looking or facilitating through the support funding of the Queensland Government a First Nations tourism action plan for this region, for the TTNQ footprint, that is going through consultation now and is aimed at being finalised by December this year, released next year. And that really just sets some framework around, through community consultation, about how mobs see the recovery and what's needed to recover the tourism industry here in the north. So tourism in the north is really setting an example for a lot of the way forward for the rest of Queensland. So it's we're in a really exciting space here. But again, it takes the commitment from at this time through your government, but it's not always relying on government either. I should say that through government funding. A lot of the tourism industry, from those that have operated those businesses, worked in the industry, it just comes from a lot of time, effort, blood, sweat, and tears to make these things work. It's not an easy industry. But so rewarding once you're into it.
Yes, there's someone online who has a question for you. If you can just unmute yourself, please, Joe. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Jenny, and thank you, Mali, for sharing this very important best practices in Queensland. I understand that societies are your society is more advanced when it comes to recognition and acknowledgement of the indigenous people. One thing that I'm interested to know is how do you handle comments or criticism from the public about that quote unquote myth of the indigenous peoples in Queensland? Second question is that in terms of entitlement, is there a scheme or a mechanism that return a portion of the income generated by this kind of tourism to the indigenous peoples or communities? I am interested to know the ways or means which this sharing scheme is implemented in Australia. And the third question, I think I'm also interested to the response of the domestic tourists with regards to this, indigenous tourism in your place. Thank you.
Great, thank you for your questions there. I guess I'll just recap where you were. So in terms of the, which one am I remembering first? In terms of the quotes and I guess the perception from the wider community, how that is dealt with, I guess it's a bigger story and an investment not only from the Queensland Government but from the National Indigenous Australians Agency, the Commonwealth or federal body that is tasked then with the I guess the development and progression of Indigenous peoples and things like the Pathway to Treaty. We recently had commitment from the Prime Minister around enshrining a voice to Parliament, an Indigenous voice to Parliament. These sorts of things help break down some of those barriers or misconceptions around Indigenous people, and just a really important part then, I guess, through tourism itself is being able to truth tell and be part of the truth telling experience, which I guess then just integrates or engages more of your non-Indigenous audience to understanding of some of the trials and tribulations, put in nicely, that Indigenous people had to deal with here. And look, the mob all across Australia are really strong in their conviction, and I think that bodes well for them. They're resilient and have inner resilience that's just been built up over their time. So yeah, look, I guess you're always going to have those negative comments, but I think in the essence of it, the good far outweigh the bad in this particular instance around tourism. I hope that answered that question. Then the next question was around
A scheme that returns a portion of the
yes.
income generated.
So we have through Our Country Advisory Service a wealth sharing model that we use, and it's developed as well. Like I said, we're the Department of Tourism, Innovation and Sport. So through our innovation arm, there was some framework that was set up around a wealth sharing model that we share with our Indigenous operators. That then just identifies the key traditional owners, communities, organisations that they're building a partnership with or a tourism business with, and then identifying clearly at the start of any venture what that wealth sharing model is going to look like. The Queensland Government doesn't recoup or there's no payment back to the government in a financial aspect. Whereas what we're wanting to see again is around the transition into employment and commercially viable businesses. So that I guess that wealth sharing model is set up by those businesses to share with community, but there's no expectation then to provide that back to the government in any financial way. So I hope that makes sense.
third question was about the response of domestic tourists to Indigenous tourism.
Yeah, so look, it's an interesting one. It's there's been some reports, and it is tasked with our Tourism and Events Queensland arm, which is a statutory body. So they're being able to read or gathering data on the comments made on TripAdvisor and all of those types of things around Indigenous tourism experiences and what they've been able to experience while engaged in them. And I guess the comments anecdotally, and I can only say anecdotally, but I can share some actual data with the group as well. I'll share it through Dennis so I can get to you. But it's been really positive. And I guess just the social conscious, that continuation over the last 20, 30 years of understanding the Indigenous story, the Torres Strait Aboriginal story, is really you're starting to see the impact of that. And I guess so the understanding then from your non-Indigenous sector around the importance that Indigenous people play within Australia and within the tourism industry has been really positive. So hope that answers some of it.
Other questions? People?
I have a question related to what has been discussed a little bit broader. There's so many different organizations involved in Indigenous tourism. How do you, and what is the role of the department in mediate the different interests that different organizations have?
It's a really key aspect and one that I've, through consultation, through different meetings that you attend, it's always being able to sort of navigate all of that support that's available to you. And it's never been an easy question. It hasn't been answered yet. For anyone that's wanting to start a business, yep, I've got an idea, great. I can look at the Queensland Government site and someone will be able to help me. And you get on there and you've got 1,000 different programs with 1,000 different grants, with 1,000 different support options, and it just becomes really, it becomes overwhelming for you when you're really just thinking about how your business is. So in that aspect, there's always a need for really good business hubs or one-stop shops that people can enter into. And that just makes the job of the operator a lot easier when wanting to engage. There's nothing like that that's set up at the moment, a one-stop shop. It's really around your self-learning or self-investigation about what's available out there, and then trying to find that right link. However, the Our Country Advisory Service, and I don't want to give it too much of a plug, but that's what the role of our officers play. So you're being able to engage with them, and then they can navigate the support systems for you and provide the necessary people at the right time.
No more questions online.
Great. Thank you very much, guys. Appreciate your time.
Difficult for you.
Oh, beautiful.
Maybe we'll stand there. And also a little present.
Great. You have to do that. Thank you, Dennis. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Mali.
Thank you, Greg.
Thank you.
Great.
Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. So, we'll have a little break now for lunch in the room, and online I will talk to you about the activity that is designed for you to participate in. Okay. So can you check on the lunch? Okay. Okay, so all the participants can participate in this activity, and you can do it either in your spare time or later on this afternoon. So the activity is about designing a new regenerative tourism product. So it just encourages you to think about what else organizations you work with can do in this space. And the idea of generative tourism is that if we talk about sustainable tourism, it's usually thought of as doing no harm, right? So you try to not result tourism in deterioration of culture or the natural environment. However, the regenerative tourism idea is that tourism should give back to destinations more than it takes. So it needs to actively promote societal well-being, regeneration of natural environment, and tourism should let people and nature thrive. So it means that tourism should be the means of achieving the goals for societal well-being and thriving natural environment. And there has been quite a lot of academic discussions on this topic on how to achieve regenerative tourism. Some of it came out of New Zealand, and this is one of the explanations of what the regenerative tourism should be, based on the traditional Maori values in New Zealand. And you can see at the roots of the tree, this is the Maori knowledge and the Western science and the values that are held by the New Zealanders. And also through the Treaty of Waitangi, which is the treaty between the Maori peoples and the settlers. Tiaki promise is a promise for tourists to behave well while on the country. And so that's the roots of the regenerative tourism. In the middle, we have the trunk, which is basically the organizations that are developing and promoting tourism. And in the branches and the leaves of this tree, we have the outcomes of regenerative tourism, which you see the social well-being, the cultural well-being, the environmental well-being, and the economic well-being. Okay, so the idea is that we move beyond sustainability and trying to think more holistically about the development and try to really not only restore but create a very thriving natural environment and also contribution to local cultures. Okay, so the activity is for you to think about a new product or experience that can be offered by your organization or community, or that your organization can support. And this needs to be a new product or experience, even if your organization has already developed a range of products for tourists. And you need to think about the existing resources that can become the tourist attraction, the motivation for tourists to visit this place, the resources and skills that are already in place and which need to be developed, which organizations can provide support and what kind of support it should be. Then you can outline existing tourism products and experiences offered by the organization, describe the new experience, and most importantly, think about how this product will improve natural environment, preserve and strengthen culture, and address any social or economic issues. So when you read earlier this week, I have sent out the Word document to those registered participants with this table and the previous description of the activity. And so this is for you to fill it out and type what you would like to develop in your community, in your business, or in organization you work with in terms of cultural tourism. And you can submit your field in a Word document in this Dropbox link, and also use Padlet. You can see the link here for you to share responses so that we can discuss in the afternoon after the panel session. I will also put these links up for you in the chat. Okay, so this is basically the activity for you to think about, to stimulate your thinking about what could be a new product in an organization that you work in or you work with. And currently we'll have a short break until 1 o'clock Australian time. So we will recommence in about 25 minutes. So thank you. Oops, apologies. The slides were not shared. Okay. So what I was referring to is this activity. If you go to the Dropbox link that I just shared, you will see the template for a Word document. And this is where you can type the new product you would like to develop, right? And the other link for the Padlet is where you can also provide the contribution to each question that I previously mentioned to you. Okay, so that can help us also discuss what seem to be the priorities of new products and what resources exist or are required and what support is required and what kind of benefits tourism can actually develop to the community and the nature. Okay. And if you have any questions about this activity, you can also ask in the chat.
All right, now, my name is Jenny Panchal. I am Dr. Dennis Tolkash's colleague. I'm visiting Cairns as well, and it's good to be here. It's good to see familiar faces or names online, and it's nice to meet new people here in Cairns. So we will now start the panel discussion, but I'll first introduce each speaker and then allow them to present this afternoon. So first we'll start with Crag Carttling. So Crag Carttling has worked with Indigenous and community groups for 20 years in the not-for-profit, government, and private sectors. He worked as a tour guide, trainer, marketing consultant, and in policy and product development. He has an academic background in environmental and social science and is in the final semester of a double MBA, Master Innovation and Entrepreneurship. He ran the joint management unit with Northern Land Council in the Northern Territory, working with traditional owners and Parks Australia and Parks NT, supporting community-based natural and cultural resource management and tourism development. Cultural tourism has always been an area that he is very passionate about, as it supports cultural heritage management, environmental management, and economic development, and gets people together on country to have fun and get to know each other. Crag is currently working with Jabalbina Yalanji Aboriginal Corporation and traditional owners of Daintree National Park to develop a community-based Indigenous tourism hub and incubator with Eastern Kuku Yalanji people. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Crag Carttling.
Thank you, everyone, and thank you for the introduction. Before I begin, I'll acknowledge the traditional owners, the Irukandji people of the country we're meeting on, and the regional traditional owners, the Gimoy, Wallabara, Yidinji, and Chabukai, and also the Eastern Gugu Yalanji traditional owners who own the land and sea a little way north of here that I'm working really closely with. So I'll talk to you briefly today about our project, and I'll focus on the two key topics, which is how Indigenous cultural tourism can have a regenerative process in terms of culture and also in terms of natural values. And there's two major components to our project that are driving both of those. But before I begin, I'll show a quick video that just captures some key sentiment from our project, and that comes from my colleague Sasha Schonenberger.
Our Javavena motto is Yalanji Wara Murugu Jungurji Maga Bamanga Bobugo, and that means our Yalanji Bama stands strong together for our people and our land. I am the Cultural Tourism Assistant Manager. My main goal in this role is to, make sure that tourism's being done properly on our country, and our elders and our traditional owners are on board every step of the way with it. Our Eastern Gugi LNG boundary runs from the Mowbray River up to the Annan River just south of Cooktown. Got the Daintree Rainforest and the Great Barrier Reef side by side. This is our country, this is our area, and our people are still here today. We have three main clan groups, Yalanji, Jalunji and Nyungu. We've got 44 apical ancestors, and we've got the most beautiful bit of country in Australia, I reckon. Why not get people up here and let them hear it from the traditional owners who have been here and have stories to tell?
If you come on an early morning, you'll see dolphins, heaps of turtles along the way.
So, as Sasha was saying, the area that we're working on, we're very lucky in regards to tourism that it's a major regional destination with global recognition of brand in terms of obviously the two World Heritage Sites, the Great Barrier Reef and the Wet Tropics World Heritage Area, but also Daintree National Park and Port Douglas. So for us, the real opportunity and the long-term goal is to reposition the of that area so that Eastern Gugi culture, and in fact the culture of all rainforest bummer through the wet tropics, is recognised hopefully as much as the Great Barrier Reef and the wet tropics rainforest. We believe our product is high quality and immersive beyond a basic tourism experience, and of course to lend to the environmental regenerative aspect of that, not just sustainable or low impact, but we aim to have a positive impact through some projects that we're starting at the moment. So some of our major partners include Queensland and federal governments, Queensland Parks and Wildlife Service, the Wet Tropics Management Authority, Queensland Trust for Nature, Mossman Botanic Gardens, and Rainforest 4 Foundation and Rainforest Rescue Foundation, who are not-for-profit groups that engage with various philanthropic groups also. So just a bit of background about Eastern Gugi lands. You see this map up here with the pink, green and yellow, and that land stretches from just south of Cooktown to just south of Port Douglas. In total, there's about 230,000 hectares of legally determined land under the Native Title Act and under the Aboriginal Lands Act, although Eastern Gugi traditional lands and cultural lands spreads much further than that into other areas. There's 4 national parks which are jointly managed, and there's an Indigenous protected area. The pink land through there is Aboriginal freehold land that's intended for housing and development. And there's also 15 Indigenous land use agreements, and they have some power, but they all also make things quite complex in terms of doing business on Eastern Yalanji country. So our tourism project is underpinned by our Tourism Strategic Directions Plan. So the plan was developed as a requirement through the negotiation process to transfer those national parks back to Aboriginal ownership. And it was Eastern Yalanji elders who said tourism was a major area of interest for them and also a major concern for them, and they wanted to bring in a consultant to work with them and to establish a tourism strategy to make sure that they could see a road forwards for them to really meaningfully be involved in the tourism space and to make sure that those natural and cultural values were managed as well. So we're in the process now of taking that strategy out to industry consultation, and we hope to have that strategy finalised by the end of this year. But we're nonetheless using it and working to it anyway, even though it's only in draft form. So the Eastern Yalanji tourism vision that was provided by elders at the time and is in the strategy is Nana Eastern Yalanji Wara, Nyungu Yalanji and Jalan Wara, proud members of the world's oldest living and surviving culture, welcome visitors to share respect for our bubu, where the world's oldest Maja meets our pristine Jalan, Bana Yaralji, Gija and Juru. Nana Juma Najul Aja. See you next time. So, and you can see there in terms of the discussion around the regenerative powers of tourism, the core of this vision is about respect, and it's about respect for culture and people, and it's also about respect for land and sea and country. So the key drivers that come out of that strategy that we're focusing on to develop our project is, first of all, we're starting with cultural heritage. So that's a cultural connections project, working with family groups, working with elders, going through country and figuring out how to do tourism in a culturally respectful way. And that was Mali talked about the importance of that in his presentation as well. We're developing a tourism hub and incubator that will work with existing businesses and also new ones. And also bringing together industry and Bama to talk, because tourism is all about partnerships. And if you think you can get tourism going by sitting in a fishbowl or by yourself and not engaging with the rest of the industry, you're in trouble. We're also establishing a Bama Futures Fund, which is really a philanthropic trust to take donations, which is just an additional stream of revenue for us. And we're pushing forwards with a range of projects to build on this idea of having reforestation guides and rangers, and that's really that space where we aim to have that positive regenerative effect on natural values and link that back to our tourism projects. So here's some of the Jubbulbinna rangers at a tree planting day. So Rainforest 4 Foundation and Rainforest Rescue Foundation, they work with philanthropic groups to purchase land and then to do revegetation with those. So we're also working in the carbon sequestration space as well, and looking to purchase properties and be doing reforestation, and to use those experiences as a tourism opportunity as well, because as we know, people all around the world are really keen for an opportunity to feel like they've made a difference and to engage with local groups, not just culturally, but also environmentally. So the core focus of those projects isn't tourism, but we're leveraging our tourism activities off those projects. And you'll see a lot of mainstream operators in the industry all promote their eco certification by supporting projects like this. The difference in our case is we're not using a third party, we're actually running the project through Jubbulbinna and with Bama involved. So the other part is that we're actually building a culture and visitor centre, or the physical tourism hub. So this will be in Cape Tribulation, which is a major tourism node inside Daintree Park. And we hope to have this project finished in approximately 2 years. And this will be the centre of our operations then. So there's two parts to the hub. There's the physical building, but there's also the service that the hub will provide to existing Eastern Yalanji tourism operators. And so that'll be a support service for them. Also, the hub will form those interconnections with the regional industry, will help to develop new products and support Bama to engage in tourism at all levels. So as I said before, we're starting with a cultural connections project. So this for me is why I enjoy working in the Indigenous tourism space the most. And for me, you know, I've seen non-Indigenous and in fact Indigenous tourists as well who have grown up in metropolitan areas and had little experience of culture leave cultural tourism experiences in North Australia literally in tears. The experience of getting an opportunity to spend some quality time with traditional owners has completely changed and reevaluated their worldview. And also there's the internal process as well, where it shouldn't take something like tourism to bring groups together internally to be sharing information and knowledge. But the fact is getting elders in cars and getting them out on country takes resources and time, and tourism can actually provide those resources and experiences. So we're going out to sites and recording cultural knowledge with elders for visitors. We're developing information for tourism, for visitors in the tourism industry, and interpretive materials to train our guides and launch our tours from. So the basic steps of the Cultural Connections project involve visiting sites with elders and young bummer to share stories about those places and think about cultural protocols and so forth. Recording cultural film content, tours. Again, really important to get those cultural protocols clear so that all the different family groups and clan groups and elders are comfortable with the way tourism is being done on these places. We've run a couple of pilot tours and we'll continue to do that over the coming months. And then, of course, as always, with your project management, you get your feedback and you go again. So yeah, I would say in terms of our two topics for the discussion today, tourism can definitely be a vehicle to strengthen culture. Running a process like ours, which is not that common, can be quite resource intensive if you're really running a community-based process. Restoration projects and positive environmental projects can definitely be hugely complementary in this space. And of course, it's all about stakeholder engagement and moving at a pace that everyone's happy with. And I've got discussion here, but I think we're going to save that and do it as a group. Hey, excellent. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you very much, Craig. Actually, you got me at culture there, and looking at those images and that video of these ladies earlier, I think it's encouraged me to visit those sites in this part of Queensland. So I think I'll come back and visit those sites and go for those tours as well. All right, our next speaker is Mr. Marcus Brady. Marcus is a sales and marketing manager at Mandingal by Ancient Indigenous Tourists. You have to correct that. This is a new Indigenous owned and operated tourism company that is developing eco-tours and events just east of Cairns in the land of Mandingal by Yidinji people. He is a tourism marketing professional who has represented world-class products and destinations across local, domestic, and international markets in Australia for over 20 years. Prior to joining Mandingal by Ancient Indigenous Tours, Marcus has worked for a variety of cruise and diving companies, Wet Tropics Management Authority, Tourism, Tropical North Queensland, among others. Ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome Mr. Marcus Brady.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for having me today. And I too want to pay my respects to the traditional owners on the country on which we meet. Irukandji here in our immediate part of Cairns, Gimoy, Watabara, Yidinji to the greater area of Cairns. And of course, the people I work with, Maningalpai, Ancient Indigenous Tours, Maningalpai Yidinji people. It looks nothing like it is spelt. So Mandingal Bay, it looks like, but it's Maningalpai. And I have the great honour of being the sales and marketing manager for this new tourism experience here in Cairns. We've been really operating on a regular basis since March. So what I'm going to take you through is our journey, how we've got to where we've got. Lots of ideas in tourism have been, largely adopted by the greater community through Maningalba Yidinji Aboriginal Corporation, my employer, and indeed the leaders in tourism being an aspirational industry and a generator of economic and social well-being for this traditional owner group. So this is a little bit of a shameless plug, guys. Really, I'm a sales and marketing guy, so I'm here to sell you guys what we've got to offer. You know, we're doing this now on a daily basis, and really proud of where we've come. So, okay, yes, I've got a PDF for you. So this is just some key milestones. Obviously, the major milestone for Maningalba Yidinji people was gaining their native title determination in 2006. So, you know, people who've been here for thousands of years. This is not ancient history, 2006, not that long ago, to gain that acknowledgement as a traditional owner group. And from there, they've been able to build out these industries. Right through to Sea and Land Ranger program. Now, this has been the coming together of a workforce, working with scientists, working with national parks, council, state and federal government agencies to rebuild a country that was devastated by some very bad decisions that were made over many, many years. You know, to the point where the waterways, the fresh waterways that supported fish, birds, crocodiles, just east of Cairns, were reduced to the same acidity as battery acid. You know, nothing would grow there. The soils were red, like the surface of Mars red. So this is what they inherited as a traditional owner group in 2006. And what they have achieved just in that short period of time, and this is what we share on our tours, is just where they've come from. You know, from a devastated environment to one that is thriving again in partnership. So they talk about tenure blind, you know, their partnerships, their traditional owners, their country is tenure blind. So they can move through their country because they have strong agreements with land managers, with landowners, private landowners, with national parks. So they can get into these areas of their country. They can do traditional burning of those areas. They can manage feral animals, feral weeds on country. And it's been an outstanding outcome. And that's certainly part of, and this is what Crag was saying as well, you know, this is certainly part of our story and what our visitors want to hear, you know, is a traditional owner group determining their own path and right at the centre of a model that incorporates lots of different partners that support the traditional owner group at the centre of that model, and just what you can achieve when you've got that in place. Okay, so this is our new big shiny thing. So this operates at the Cairns Marina. It's a 42 passenger, 12 metre river cruise vessel. So this has really been the game changer for us as a company. We now can have people come to the Refleet terminal, which is right in the middle of the central business district of Cairns, hop on our vessel, and within 15 minutes, they're with the traditional owner on their traditional country. So it's an immediate, you know, impact on that person, and they feel that they're getting great value in the tour. When they sit down, they see this fantastic boat, you know, beautiful vessel, and they meet our guides, our Maningalba Yidinji Rangers, and they just start to have that experience, and they relax into it very quickly. You know, so we are very lucky as a tour operator here in Cairns. We're so accessible, you know, and so it's an outstanding opportunity. So yeah, we're very proud of our vessel. We then come across what's called the Trinity Inlet, the main river system, just east of Cairns. We go down Hills Creek and we come to our infrastructure. So this is part of a package of support that we received from both state and federal governments in the last 2 years. This is part of stage 1 of 6 more stages of infrastructure development that will happen over at East Trinity. And this allows us to operate all day long. So in terms of the tides that used to, you know, really make it difficult for us to get in and out at different times of the day, because we have this floating pontoon and this 35 metre long gangway, we can now access country all day long. And so that just opens up opportunities for morning, afternoon tours and evening tours as well. So dinners, our sunset cruises and things like that. So that's really been part of the game changer. This is our Yulu, our stingray shelter. So this is the first thing that our guests on our hands-on country eco tour see. It looks like something out of Star Trek, Star Wars. Looks like a ship that's landed in amongst the mangroves. Sustainable. So we collect, we use our own water. We have solar panels, we have batteries. So this is completely off-grid, and we have won a number of sustainable awards for this building. And then this is stage one, as I said, of 5 more stages to go, where this is going to connect up to a 1.5 kilometre raised boardwalk. That means people can have great access, comfortable access over the mangrove ecosystem. And then there'll be a number of towers, 3 by 33 metre high towers over there. So what is being proposed is pretty fantastic. What we have already now, though, has allowed us to operate. We can start now. We can show our partners in government and private sector that we are here, we're making money, we're covering costs, we're profitable, we're employing our own people, and you can get behind us and help us achieve the next 5 stages of infrastructure development. So we're at a very exciting stage in the lifetime of this tourism product. So this is our product. Our main product is our hands-on country eco tour. We're operating that 3 days a week, but we can change. We can move around with the demand that comes in. So I'm constantly getting, our main market is our domestic leisure market into Cairns at the moment, really led by Melbourne. Victoria is our largest market. And we're getting a lot of families during the school holiday periods, and then your older demographic of Australians coming through, and the response has been fantastic. But this is for the 3-hour tour. What we're also getting is corporate groups that want to, tick that box, which is written into their reconciliation plans now, within their strategies, and they want to engage with traditional owners. They want to have an Indigenous experience, but sometimes the 3 hours doesn't fit in to the way they want it to do. So we're flexible, okay? We never say no. We say yes to everything. We bite off perhaps sometimes more than we can chew. We chew like mad and we make it happen. And yeah, so as a team, we work that out, but we have done some really fantastic things that are out of the box, perhaps even something that we didn't think of, but the client is asking for these sorts of experiences. So we go and create that. And in other words, that's been a great opportunity for us to go and talk to community, to different sectors of our community, be they young people, who can deliver an experience on country. I have a group of entrepreneurs coming from Sydney next month, and they want to have an experience where they sit down with an artist. And so we're engaging with the Yarrabah Art Gallery. And so we're able to sort of move through our region and deliver a number of different experiences for these people. We have a harpist, Natalie Mann, who works with us. So she's an orchestra trained harpist, and so she blends her music and her belief that the trees are alive, the trees have power, the trees have resonance, the trees produce music. Yeah. And then she blends that story and that belief with one of our lead female tour guides, Larissa Mundraby, and she talks in terms of her beliefs as a Mundingal Yidinji woman and how she sees the power in those same trees from that perspective. So we're blending, a contemporary, I suppose, perhaps European view of environment with traditional owner views of that. And it's just, opening up different ways of presenting the story, presenting how that's a powerful story. So being flexible in tourism is always important, and we're doing that every day. This is where we're at. This is now increased to 2,000. So we've had a great start to the business. And as I said, we've only started since March. So it's only really been just over 6 months. Retail agency reach, we're writing contracts with wholesalers, both domestic and international wholesalers. Online travel agencies. So we've set up, we use Resdi as a reservation system, and that has a beautiful connection to the online travel agencies. So what we're trying to set up is a business that's simple and largely automated, where you have bookings dropping in that are paid. So there's not, a hell of a lot of phone calls and emails to sort of chase people, not a lot of creation of invoicing. Largely the leisure market drops in either directly, 20% of our bookings are direct bookings, or straight through the online travel agencies as well. So that's Get Your Guide, TripAdvisor's Viator channel, Red Balloon, and Welcome to Country, which is a dedicated Indigenous online travel agency here in Australia. So that's the way, we've approached, I guess, the setup of the business, is that a few people can manage it. And the cruise ships are coming back into Cairns, which is fantastic. There are 2 massive P&O ships in the harbour yesterday. So that's nearly 4,000 people spilling out into the CBD of Cairns. So we've certainly gone from 0 to hero since the pandemic days. I mean, they were pretty awful days here in Cairns. It's wonderful to see it all turning on and lighting up. This kind of just gives you a bit of an idea of our trajectory, and you can see the online business is certainly sort of dominating. So sort of by June, when I looked at this at the end of the financial year, that was very much dominating. Negotiated rate is agencies starting to come in and support the business. And then internal is largely our corporate groups coming through, where we create the booking and we create the experience to match what they want to get out of the experience as well. So it's been a really interesting ride. Some of it was predictable. Most of it certainly wasn't. You put a product into the marketplace and you see what comes back. And so we're constantly, talking about product development throughout the whole business as we go. We've got some brilliant ideas that are coming from the market. I don't know if this is going to play because it's a PDF. I don't think it will, but this is become a very strong mantra, I guess, for Maningalpai people, our team, our tourism team. We are part of country and country is part of us. It's as powerful for our people internally as it is for our customers. This is what we want our customers to walk away with, that connection to country, that connection to each other, and that connection to Maningalpai Idingi people and their stories and their culture. People craving a deeper level of connection when they travel. This is all part of, regenerative tourism, feeling a deeper level of connection. It's not just a status. Tick the box. I've seen Sydney Harbour and, the Eiffel Tower. It's now having a deeper experience on ground. And we feel like the product that we're presenting to the market is delivering just that deeper level of connection. So, yes, thank you very much. Is there any questions?
We'll have a panel discussion.
Okay, great.
Thank you very much, Marcus. That was very interesting. And I think I have a couple of keywords to take away this afternoon from your presentation, and one of them is connection, very strongly. That was very powerful. The other realization that I had listening to you is that businesses continue to evolve. And as you said, you start thinking outside the box. And I'm pretty sure there are attendees in the Philippines, in Indonesia, in Malaysia, and somewhere else who are really learning from your talks this afternoon. I guess the third word that I have is, what was the first one? You mentioned, I picked that up, storytelling. There's really power in storytelling, and maybe I can use this opportunity as well to plug that there will be a talk by Professor Gianno Moscardo on storytelling in tourism on the 6th of October. We can send you the link as well if you want to register for that webinar by JCU. All right, we have our third speaker here this afternoon. Unfortunately, Professor Henrietta Murray cannot attend this session, but she did send a colleague. And if we can just welcome Mr. Carl Fourmile. Carl is an artistic director and company owner of Minjil. He is a Yidinji man from the land of Kimoy in Far North Queensland. Carl is a cultural performer, practitioner, and local leader in Indigenous arts. Yep, and has a strong roots in dance, lore, and education. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Carl Fourmile.
Kurang diri Indo banyor ba ilak anak-anak ngayadin ba marbo naka gimoy bara waronye ngayo pa jambulo ba may lajanan nying waronye ba ma jamo kanyi ba may nyakale bon ba yeng ngo nyakale japo yeng ngo ben ngirman na awan
Nyuramba nawo jabakanji bama ngayan na bolba numbanja nyura bama ngayan jabagai bama nyakalai bama gungai bama bolwai gulai and yaragai nani bama gugui. Hello, I'm representing of Jabagai people, Jabaganji tribe, but also Yakali family, also the Yakalai clan group. On behalf of Minjalia, I'd like to welcome you.
Yo, I just like to thank Brother Dunduru from the Jabakanji people from Nyakale family group for his welcoming me onto his country here, Jabakanji. Thank you, my name is Marlon Carl Fourmile. And yes, we own and run our own company, Minjil. Minjil is a Yidden word that means spark that comes from the fire. So when you see these small sparks come from the fire, when you sit around the fire at nighttime, these little embers shoot up into the sky, that's Minjil. And we see our individual selves, because there's many more of us within our team. We see ourselves as these small sparks that come from the big fire. And the big fire is our family groups, our cultural connections, our cultural business connections with each other. It's our language, songlines, our stories, our connection to country. We try to base our business practices based on our cultural business endeavors and practices, how the old people done it. Surviving in a business world that's determined heavily by westernized business practices, we are seeking ways of reforming our own mindsets and entrepreneurship, of identifying ways that we could submit and also flow with and connect our cultural ways and our cultural business ways into that westernized business practice. And we do this daily, and we change daily, we manipulate daily, we pivot wherever we can to assert our authority over or within the westernized business way of these practices. So sometimes we do these things a little bit differently. I am a cultural creative consultant, past performer, Yidinji man, and so is my brother Dunduru. We have spent many years sharing and showcasing our culture through the platform of song and dance. So that's a background, and that's what Minjil is about. Our vision is to seek true equity from our stories, from our culture, from our land, and seek ways of doing business, not just on the ground, but at this level that we're at now, but we aim to strike goals in corporate industry, owning fleets of vessels that go out to the reef, controlling licenses that vessels seek to get out to the reef. Because if I ask a question to you guys here today, I'm not too sure how many people will put their hand up, but these vessels, such as the big companies that are going out to the reef of the Bama people, what are those licenses worth? Does anybody know? With a show of hands, anybody? No. So these are the things that we want to get into that corporate industry. We don't just want to stay at the level that's being introduced to us or fed to us by spoon. We want to own the docking rights that the P&O ships come and park their vessels. We want to own the rights of the wharf that's established already now by companies like Ports North and so on and so forth. This is where the real equity lies. This is where the real economic lies in our country. And we must understand that all tourism-based business is on Indigenous land. And yes, it's good telling stories, it's good dancing, it's good singing our songs to share as an introduction, but we need to be on a high level of business if we are to get anywhere in this system and in this westernized business practice. We don't see ourselves just staying at one level. We want to be where the big players are. And that means owning those rights and seeking out those types of informations. We just got back from Western Australia, talking to a few people over that way. And the way they do things, which is Western Australia is highly evolving and highly based on generating income that filters down to its traditional owners or the indigenous people through mining. So the discussions we had with those mob over there was, how do you guys do it? How can we use that as a filter system to then generate our interests through tourism? So what the mob are doing over there is they're subcontracting to the bigger companies through civil engineering. They own their own earth-moving equipment, backhoes, all of those kinds of equipment. We have not yet seen on the entire East Coast, forgive me, quote me on this, may be wrong, but we have not seen yet that capacity in the tourism industry, where our Bamba or any indigenous people along the East Coast, which generates millions and millions of dollars, maybe not as much as the billions that come from the mining industry, but millions and millions of dollars are generated on indigenous land through this whole entire East Coast. And many of those dollars come from the reef and the rainforest here in the Bama segment of this country, North Queensland. So how can we allocate and find ways of connecting through business, real business, because you must understand that we are true entrepreneurs, Junjuru, my brother, and our team. No government funding. We started off in our first year, 45K, and now we are above hitting just over 350K in our last annual year. We aim to generate more revenue this year with by creating more partnerships with mob from Western Australia, our own mob, dealing with philanthropic and those kinds of people too as well in the future. But now it's all about us and us gaining the experience and learning from each other. We flew over to Perth on our own money, no government funded, it was on our own backs. We want to stay like this for a while. We know it's a slower process, but it's a much more healthier system for us to be able to learn these systems. Yes, we can employ our consultants, that kind of stuff, but it's better that we be the consultants ourselves. That's our vision. We hope to generate those contracts over here through tourism. Equity is key, and we want to share culture, but we don't want to deface culture and our values and our integrity by doing this. Our brothers and sisters over the West Coast, they don't normally share their culture the way we do here along the East Coast. Dance, song, some information that we share on the East Coast is seen as taboo information in the West Coast. And I thought that was essential to our growing of how we share and keep that integrity within our stream of sharing information. We don't want tourism and the market to navigate how we share and what we share. And by the history of comparing it to the artwork on the East Coast, we definitely don't want to take it in that direction. We don't want it to be watered down, just like art, our East Coast art was and still is, based on the market that comes to Cairns. A lot of our artists paint to fit this category, and sometimes it loses its cultural or its integral, its spiritual structure. But artists have to do this to make a living, to put food on the table. We don't want to be part of that makeup and that flow of tourism industry that basically looks like it's going to do the same thing, that's navigated by the bigger companies, and therefore the companies that are partnering in terms of agencies that bring the people to Cairns and surrounding areas are of a certain demographic and a certain niche. We don't want to get caught in that cycle. So we are evolving ways to try and predict how we can move in these areas. The ideal situation and outcome for us is to buy the license, have fleets of vessels that go out to the reef. That's the ultimate ideal way that we want to be doing business, and that's part of our 10-year plan, with help of some of our brothers and sisters from Western Australia and our people overseas. We've done and we've started generating partnerships overseas now, internationally, with management groups like George P. Johnson, Toyota, these kinds of corporate entities and people. That's where we want to see our people. We don't want to see our people always working for a wage. Basically, we want to see our this area, the Bama area, be the Black Atlanta of Australia. Yeah, we want you to be a millionaire. You to Yalanje Bamade Nyorobupu be millionaire. That's what we really want to see. Manangal Bama, we want them to be millionaires, so we can help each other and determine our own cycle, our own fate in this world of indigenous tourism. So that's a little bit about us and what we do and our goals. And we welcome partnership and doing business with each and every one of you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Carl and Richard. So now we will proceed to the Q&A segment, the panel discussion. So may we invite our speakers to please come forward, take a seat, and we'll be monitoring the chat. But our audience in the Zoom room, you're most welcome to switch on your camera or your microphone and ask our speakers directly.
Maybe while Mali is looking for a question, I will start first. So I wonder how the pandemic and these past 2 years have affected the development of cultural tourism and of your organizations. Because it seems like there are quite a lot of new interesting initiatives coming up. However, there was also a long time that we were in lockdown and people couldn't come here. So I wonder how that experience has affected your organizations and the region broader.
Okay. So for us, our project, unlike these guys, we were not at the stage of going to market or even being ready to. We're working on that and hope to start moving in that space later this year or next year. Because we were wanting to run that cultural connections project first and just give elders and family members and clan members time to get on country together and think about what they wanted to share and how they wanted to share, and what your points about being really careful around that and making sure that you're not damaging culture by sharing things in the wrong way. Really important to start with that. So for us, the fact that the pandemic was on was a real positive, because if you get up in Daintree last year and even earlier this year, it was nice and quiet. And over the last couple of months, we've been up there more recently with elders doing some of our work in the cultural space, and we're struggling because there's tourists crawling all over the country, and we're standing there trying to have a yarn about what's important and what they want to share, and there's people everywhere. Had we been in the market and operating a business, that would have been a very different story. So we're a very unique example of that, and I think it's something that anyone who is wanting to start tourism on their country, if they're in a really high visitor space and you're wanting to give elders that time to think through, it's really hard to do when there's 10 million tourists crawling all over the place everywhere. So yeah. But then if you're in a much more remote location, very different story. Yeah.
Thanks, Craig.
We're probably in the same, I would echo those words in terms of it giving Manangaba Yidinji a breathing space, time to consider what they need to do to get ready to run a business. And in terms of HR, how do we contract someone? How do we communicate with a new employee? How do we bring them in? Which award do we use, to employ people? Right through to insurance, to having the boat certified to take, as a commercial vessel. All of these things take time, and it took every pandemic period to get to the point where now tourism is coming back to the region. We are ready to just jump out of those gates, and that's what we've done this year. We've sort of had all the backgrounds, and now we're ready to go. And so they bring someone like me along to start the sales and marketing function and enter the market. And so that was really not a lost period, but it was probably, in terms of our organisation, pretty important.
Carl and
Well, we only started our business like just before the pandemic hit, so so we actually it didn't affect us too much because we learned how to pivot, and the only way that we learned that is just by just changing business practices and identifying where the solutions were. So it was for us. We found it not a much more relaxing time, but we were actually a lot more busier because we were working doing back end identification of how we could pursue our business interests. So we became more busier doing those kinds of things, which I'm sure Managabai and Yuklade Yalanji Bamanda too as well. Would have been in increasing capacity in identifying these new ways of doing business. So what we did was not very smart. We had our own cultural outlet down on the Esplanade. So we had a shop selling artifacts and things like that. We partnered with Mali and a couple other companies down south. So there wasn't tourists here coming to Cairns. So we had an outlet. We couldn't do much with our business as it was modeled at that time. So we had to pivot. So how could we make money? So we decided to manufacture artifacts and these kinds of cultural tools to then sell, obviously, to investors or partners down south, Sydney, Melbourne, Perth, all of these kinds of places. From little old Cairns, which we've done at the backyard, in the shed, with locally collected timbers and wood. So they were really high quality, and they were really and they had story and effort behind it. So that's one of the ways we pivoted through the pandemic. Business opened, it closed a few times, which affected also how we could pay our lease. Obviously, the rent of the lease down on the Esplanade is much more higher than trying to have a shop on Appleton Street or somewhere that's less in sight of people. But that was our mistake, but also our experience and how we learned to pivot our business to as well. So the pandemic, it was a busy time, and it did give us time and practice to and think about how we were going to attack, where we needed to be when eventually we come out of C-19 and that atmosphere and those economic situations. So it was a time of learning for us. And as we said before, it's hard for us. It was hard for us back then because we just surviving this off our own pocket. So we're creating a lot of revenue yet, also going back into a very high lease on the Esplanade as well. So that's a brief sort of description on how we seen the pandemic the last 3 years.
Yeah, so it's just a two-part, one for Minjil there, and then one for the Craig and Marcus. So it's just around a key step or aspect of business doing, because you acknowledge that sort of set it up on your own back, and you know, like 32 years, just for the audience, and you know, what do you think was that key step to create the business, or what step you took to be able to do that? And then the second part is for you guys, just around what the key step was, lobbying support from government for your potential ideas and projects. Maybe I'll start with Carl first.
Yeah.
And there's probably many steps to it, but you know, maybe the first 2, 3 key steps.
Understanding business, really, and mentorship from real business people that can make $1 out of 50 cents. We don't want to be talking to people who are going to tell us, oh, you go to government, you go to Prime Minister and cabinet, all this other rubbish, because we see that as not eligible business. A business, something that can generate something out of nothing. We didn't want to be one of those companies or teams that just depends on government, not handouts, but funding, grants, and those kind of aspects of the industry. We just didn't want to. We would rather suffer for 5 to 10 years and learn ourselves on how to do real business than be a successful business for 5 to 10 years, and then when government changes or funding dries up, or this bucket doesn't become accessible anymore, then we just die. So that's why we chose to take the hard route and just learn about business ourselves and talk to real business people, people that were, you know, had companies already, give their stories, and we through that process we found that it wasn't much different from our own cultural systems and ways of doing business. Indigenous people, believe it or not, have wonderful systems that we should be counting on and relying on, instead of always going to bodies of government or handouts. Our systems have been surviving on this country and our seas for hundreds of years. Why try and change that? So we network with our people, for our people, to our people. So but that's, I hope that answers the you know, that part of the question. Anyway, is that it was kind of an experiment, if anything, to see if we could do it. You know what I mean? So we learned a lot just by watching movies, talking to mentors, talking to business people, you know, online forums, you know, of other entrepreneurs, you know, getting in contact with people overseas, in Atlanta, to see how they done it, and it was all about Black economics and Black people or sticking together, really, and creating that circle and of wealth, and creating generational wealth, not just, you know, creating a 9-to-5 job, you know, for people. So I mean, well, we're still on that journey. It's not like, you know, but we're millionaires at this point in time, but we will be in another, you know, 5 to 10 years, of course. Yeah. Yes.
Brady, Marcus, Craig, just you need advice, I guess, for what those sort of first steps are for lobbying, any support from government taking the other route?
Well, I've only been with the business since November last year, so I wasn't part of that process. I did meet Dale and Dwayne Mundraby, the directors, almost 12 years ago. I was working with Wet Tropics Management Authority in a tourism development role and trying to meet traditional owners and just see what their aspirations were in the tourism field. And they had strong ideas back then, and then they went into successfully lobbying to have support for their ranger program. So they were proclaimed an Indigenous protected area. You know, they're managing a reserve which is unique in the world. You know, some of the things that they're doing with scientists is world class, and the largest in terms of scale in the mitigation, the things they've done with this wetlands area that's gone from, you know, absolutely decimated to a functioning environment again in a short amount of time. So their focus was very much on getting that model right and starting that program. And then I would argue that, you know, if you look at a great starting point is having a model, which is a ranger program. We have a workforce coming together and working on country and creating those storylines and having outcomes and running a business basically. But then that can then become, you know, a stepping off point for them developing a tourism business from that model. And obviously ranger programs across Australia receive a lot of support. I think government's worked out that you get a lot more bang for your buck, you get a return on investment. You know, if you give $1, you're going to get millions of dollars in return in terms of you know, values for the environment, values for social well-being, you know, values for employment, those groups. So it's been a long journey. I've just come in the end, and you know, as a sales guy, I just sort of try and connect all the dots of the tourism industry and do the marketing. And yeah, so I know I look really good wearing this badge, you know, with pride as a non-Indigenous man connected with this traditional owner group and have some pretty amazing aspirations still. But we've shown the government, yes, you've helped us with some infrastructure, but now we're standing on our own 2 feet. You know, I don't need money to employ someone. We cover our costs. You know, with self-determination. You know, we're a sustainable business.
Yeah, I think for me, like a lot of your comments and the direction you guys have taken, you know, I've spent sort of the last 6 years studying entrepreneurship and how some of the most famous entrepreneurs around the world have started completely new businesses, and your approach is very much what they've done. Mind you, the Elon Musks and so forth of the world did get some pretty juicy grants somewhere along the line, years down the track, but they started like you guys and did it themselves. And I certainly acknowledge in our space, you know, we've got this cushion of funding from government for our first 2 years to get going, and we've got this infrastructure coming through for us. But getting the timing right, I can see the risk. In some ways it would be safer to start the way you guys have, you know, because there's this transition period where we need to stand on our own 2 feet when the funding runs out. And I certainly agree with your comments. Anybody who got into this space and as part of their longer term business model were relying on grants, forget it. That's just a really bad way to go. And government policy, even potentially around ranger programs, although it seems they finally won and both sides of government realise the value of those. Touch my wooden head, they won't be going anywhere soon, but you know, there's risk there too. So I think for our project, you know, it's quite unique in that it came from that program of transferring national parks back to the ownership of Aboriginal people to be jointly managed. And, you know, that's a process that's playing out all around the world in different forms. And so that negotiation process creates immediately a long, you know, the negotiation took 5 years. So you've got a direct voice from senior elders to all the way to the minister around this issue. And as I said in my presentation, from day one, elders sat down and identified tourism as a major issue for them, both a threat and an opportunity for them. And so, you know, like a lot of the stuff that I've learned in the entrepreneurship space, like all the entrepreneurs these days kind of scoff a bit at a business plan, and they say, do it more like you guys have done out there and start doing stuff and learn as you go and pivot where you need to. The purpose of a business plan is really if you want to bring in high-end investment. So if you've got a project like you guys have got, or us, where you like, or like we want, you know, and whether you're going to government for that investment or private investors like you guys are talking about in WA and that, that's time for that business plan. So the tourism strategy was the platform. I guess the other thing that helped us is because you've got a long-term, rock-solid legal agreement and partnership between the state government and traditional owners around the management of the national park. That gives you that long-term surety for government and for us. And it actually streamlines a lot of the legal processes too around native title and so forth. So, yeah, you've got to think where you're at. And then there is a place for really good business plans, and they're really important in your feasibility work. And definitely if you've got a project that you want to get to in that space. The trick is getting those community members and Bama really at the centre of it, and there's a bit of a risk in that planning space that doesn't occur, and we'll a much more sure way to make sure that traditional owners really are at the centre of it. But I'd say with both of our projects, we're both non-Indigenous people sort of leading these projects, but you can see with both projects, there's really a lot of Bama sitting behind it that are really, we're not telling them what to do, but I'm a facilitator, not a manager. So, yeah. That's awesome.
Any more questions?
Another question is, what do you see as the big challenge going forward in developing your initiatives, your programs, your businesses? What do you think is the next big obstacle?
Next pandemic,
Next
war in
pandemic.
Ukraine, the cost of living.
So,
The world's a pretty horrible place at the moment, and tourism is the saviour of the world. We bring people together in peace and love and harmony. And if you visited someone in another country, you're less likely to blow them up. So I would say that. But tourism is a luxury item. Once you pay the rent and put fuel in the car and the kids' school fees, it's what's left. Then you start thinking, okay, tourism. It's very much a luxury item. That amount of money left over at the end of the week, I think, in this country and well, perhaps globally now, as we see America going into recession, the UK, this will impact our industry, I think, for a number of years. This is not going to just resolve itself. Yes.
I guess it's a follow-up question that I have is that, well, in the more foreseeable future, we can see a bigger influx of international tourists, Australia, into our part of Queensland. And I guess the question is, how do you prepare the business, the destination for this influx of international and domestic tourists, the mix of those?
I think I worked many years ago looking at visitor statistics nationally and also particularly for the Northern Territory and analysing all the high-level data across that. And you get a lot of people in the industry sit around, analyse data and talk about trends. Certainly from the people in the industry I've been talking to, I've not seen anyone at the moment who has the courage to say what on earth is going to happen over the next few years. At the moment, as we said, Cairns is booming, and that's still because for the majority of Australians are not travelling overseas. It's opened up a bit, and we're seeing some internationals come in, but it's nothing compared. So what's going to happen over the next few years? What happens as international picks up and domestic probably drops down, and what that's going to look like? Really don't know. Throw into the mix recessions and wars and everything else. At the moment, things are looking good, but Australia's not in a recession at the moment. Mind you, they're still trying to put the brakes on it. So, yeah.
On a positive side, just to flip it back, we've obviously had a huge Chinese market in our region the last 10 years, to see it grow and grow and grow and grow, and then obviously the pandemic and completely gone. A lot of products, tourism products were developed for that high value, volume, low yield market. Now that was maturing and that was changing, and we were getting, you know, income and coming through from the China market. But perhaps now we have an opportunity to focus on yields, on quality of service, of quality of food, of authenticity. And that perhaps this is our opportunity to be able to make the same amount of profit, you know, out of fewer people having a better experience on country. You know, so we were dining out on that Chinese market, and it was incredible for the region. There's no denying it. 215,000 the last, you know, 2019, last time we came out. Huge, and a lot of businesses have done very well out of that. But yeah, I think we have a focus now to be sustainable, have less pressures on our environment, and perhaps this is our chance to take a deep breath and develop those products for that market, which is obviously growing, which want to have sustainability in their travel experience and connect with traditional owners and Indigenous people.
Thank you. I guess I was just showing on that slide that Crag has shown us earlier about the experiences being sustainable and low impact at the same time, and at the same time positive impact as well. So I think that's what we want to aim for. And for our audience who are sitting in the Philippines, Malaysia, Indonesia, and somewhere else, what sort of words of encouragement can you guys give to them, especially those who are from Indigenous communities in the Southeast Asian region?
I think capturing on a number of what the guys here have said, most Indigenous tourism products that I've seen in Australia and around the world and in Southeast Asia, they start with that sort of low yield tourism, that cheap, simple sort of, it's a couple of hours to a half day welcome to country in Southeast Asia. It's that village visit, come into the village, meet people, they tell you their story, maybe you have some lunch and so forth. And that's an obvious place to start. And if you are an entrepreneur, you want to start simple and cheap because you don't have money. So you're building that way. But I think definitely, like your comments around, if you look at what people are really looking for, you look at how hard you work for that $10, $50, $80 a head tour that you're pumping through every day. If you're sharing a cultural story in that process, you're sharing it over and over and over and over every day, and that's where it loses its meaning. So having the courage to think big and to innovate with the experience that you're giving people. You know, one of my favourite Indigenous tourism products in Australia, there's a couple there. So one, you know, and sometimes we overthink tourism, we make it too complicated. So there's some ladies south of Catherine that just do a weaving tour, and they only run it a couple of times a year, but they charge top dollar for it. They only get about 10, 15 women from predominantly Australia, typically, you know, the cliche is doctors' wives and so forth. And the old ladies don't put on a big flash show, it's authentic. And they just sit down and they spend the whole week weaving and yarning. And that's a far more sophisticated, genuine experience that's about getting to know each other from the heart. That's also really simple from a business point of view, but it's about a deeper getting to know each other. And I think moving in that space with these experiences, sure, start with that simple welcome to country and that walking tour or the village visit. It's a nice place to start, but think beyond that and start thinking about delivering a really sophisticated, longer term, higher end experience. Yeah.
That's where it is for us. Yes, where it is for us too, because we just sort of we just sort of utilize the place there that we are confident of building long-term business with yeah. So we acquired a bit of land that it's only a small piece of dirt, but you know, it's ours. We look at doing things with it and the creek through it and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, so we do
to be putting a high-end product on that on that piece of patch of dirt. And that's what it's about. It's about high ticket sales and reverse engineering, especially in terms of financial outcomes, where we want to be and how do we get there. I think a lot of our people don't know how to plan ahead or have that business plan or have a mindset where they can reverse engineer, because we're so used to, our mob are so used to being in that mindset or in that category of always working for the man. So, and that's taught generation after generation after generation, and until somebody breaks that cycle, it's always gonna be the same. So there's many ways of doing business. And we could fail it. In 10 years we could be in the same position or worse than we are now. But like we always say, it's better that to give it a go and die standing instead of always just following the usual. So in our practices, we try and learn as much as we can, and it's all a big experiment. But we don't know. We just don't know the outcome. We can't predict the future, and numbers and economic trends and wars and pandemics and all that kind of stuff. So I think we would encourage those people to have a bigger mindset of where they want to be, and in business, and utilizing culture in tourism for generating wealth, but to aim towards a generational wealth system, utilizing culture is I think the way that people should be thinking. It's from a wider array or a wider perspective that we want to encourage our mob to do business from ground level to corporate and owning pontoons instead of being the one presenting stories on pontoons. So that's a great way to think for these mobs. Like, aim big. If you fail, just keep on going. If you fail, just go again and go again and go again and go again and go again. Failing is just a part of learning, and I think encouragement and letting our mob know that it's all right to fail, because that's how you learn. And if you because failing, it also induces experience too as well, and one should learn from those mistakes and those failures, otherwise they just become our burdens. So if we can have a mindset of where failing is good, and I'm sure you teach this, or you have taught that too as well in your experiences and coming up to where you are now, that's not taught to our mob. Our mob, I used to fail once or twice and sort of give up. So if we can encourage our youth that it's all right to hear no's, because the more no's you hear, it means that you're ideally getting closer to the yes. And the more failures you have, the more you learn and the more experience you gain. So I think that's a message that we can send out to our next generation, our youth, or anybody in the tourism industry at the level that we are now, is just having that bigger vision, high ticket sales, reverse engineering, everything, and also partnering and however you can get in contact with people that are influencing local government.
Because it's not like government do it on their own. You know this, my brother, that there are people out there that the government sort out and go to bring people to Cairns. You know, they don't just magically wave a wand and then people come. There are influential people in the world that help local government, that help the industries such as TTNQ, CRC. There's people that are being approached as we sit here today by Cairns City Council to influence the influx of, say for instance, Japanese, tourists to come back to Cairns. Very low, just like the Chinese are now. But some of these influential people have great contacts with the Japanese and with the Chinese. So it's to be in those positions, or those people in those positions, where we want to be to as well. And a lot of our mob really don't understand that how it works too as well. And I think we need to address that. And how do we address that? So is it through training? Is it through discussions like this? I think figuring out ways of how we teach and how we can create systems for our mob to learn, because I'd like to say, yeah, it's about culture, but no, it's about business really. And a lot of our mob have to do that. Otherwise, we're just going to be jumping on a vessel, going out to the reef and telling stories every day, and still, why not being rich?
I just wanted to say, we occupy the highest growth sector of the tourism industry on a global scale. Up until 2019, the cultural heritage tourism sector grew by 25%. It was the highest growing, and not just volume, but certainly yield as well. And it's simple, it's just simple storytelling. We go back to, you don't need all the, we've got infrastructure. I'm coming from a point of view of a lucky operator that has some infrastructure, but I've worked in Northern Arkaroola, Northern Flinders Ranges in South Australia as a tour guide, and we had a traditional owner, a Jamatna man, and he just started doing walking tours for an hour, from the resort just into the country, and just to show people that within 30 minutes of walking in the Australian bush environment, there's so much value, there's so much resource, and that really gives people a different view of the Australian scrub, which looks a bit rough, doesn't it? Certainly when you head west of the Great Dividing Range, you're in the outback, it's rough country, it's not the Everglades, but there is just so much value in the Australian environment that even Australians, I don't think, appreciate until they've spent that time in that environment, seeing it through the lens of a traditional owner on their country. That's just so important. So it's as simple as that. A young person can start a tour tomorrow with no infrastructure, just an idea, a story, a great story, and people will travel to them. They can tell that story and stay on country. They don't have to go and work in the mines and work away from country. They can make that happen there. It's not easy. There's no silver bullet. Tourism's a bloody hard industry to work in. I think one of the hardest, because you just, constantly, the idea of commodifying culture is certainly a challenge. Yeah, a repeated process gets wearing on both the person who's delivering it as well as the audience, if you don't, change and ask the audience to give as much to you as you're giving to them. I think, the international market is coming back. I've got my first group of Americans on Thursday next week. the German group series starts next month. And this will be a different dynamic for our people, you know, and they're going to get a lot more questions. You know what I mean? Like, you know, and I think American, perhaps German, Europeans have perhaps had more Indigenous experiences in other cultures. If it's Canada or if it's the Sami in Finland or African nations, you know, perhaps they've got they're more mature as an Indigenous audience, you know, tourism audience. So that's going to be interesting interactions. And we're really excited about it, but there's certainly going to be a lot more, I think, questions asked, and we'll see where that goes. But I think that'll make it more exciting for our tour guides as well.
Thank you for that. I think our audience has really benefited from your insights this afternoon. And I like what you said, Marcus, and I think it's either of you has presented that in a slide earlier about working with what you have. You don't have to reinvent the wheel, just work with what you have. And I think that's a very good, powerful message as well. If there are no more questions, we can close and present some gifts to our speakers. Thank you, gentlemen.
No worries. Quick photo?
Yes,
Quick
please.
huddle? Yeah? Mali will take it.
Ciao, Mali.
The best looking panel.
1, 2, 3. Can you ask the ladies to join us? Join us.
Come on.
You were in the video.
Make us look at the turn.
Yeah.
You were in the video. You're counted as well. Proof that I was here.
Now it's October. Yeah, and I hold my stomach
Hi, everyone. Those online, thank you for staying online. We just had thank yous to our speakers today, and just trying to see if any comments have been made on the Padlet, and if these activities a bit too complex, let me show you an example that one of the participants has shared already. So as you can see in the Word document, you can identify what kind of resources exist. You could go in a bit more detail, not just historical, cultural, and culinary opportunities. What exactly is there? Maybe there is a hot springs, waterfalls, maybe traditional knowledge related to agriculture, a different way to grow a certain crop, or a way that the crops are preserved, or food that is cooked, right? Think about what exactly can be developed in what kind of product. So if you look at food tourism, right, let's say your cuisine uses a type of seaweed, right? So how can that become a tour product? So you get tourists to come and do some farming with you. They can plant the seaweed, for example, and then cook together a dinner. So you can teach them how to cook that meal. And then it's an immersive experience that demonstrates the value of an agricultural product from how it's created to how it's consumed, right? And then it's important to also think how it contributes, right? So the contribution in my example would be that it actually preserves that culinary tradition. It provides opportunity to socialize, because cooking is always a social activity, right? You do something together. And it also helps to solve some socioeconomic problem, because in many countries, agriculture is quite challenging, right? It's not a very well-paid economic sector. So you preserve and help the livelihoods of those farmers in the communities. Okay? So that's the idea behind the exercise. Right? Let's just have a look again at the Padlet and the Dropbox. So I think what we might do is I might leave you to do this on your own at home. And please submit the results to us by next week. And then we'll send some feedback by email to you. We'll provide the summary of the feedback and a discussion of what seems to be an important coming from you. Remember, this seminar series are focused on sharing the experiences, sharing between ourselves and with ourselves. So it is interesting for everyone to see what others have been thinking about, what are their interests, and where they see opportunities in growing tourism, and share those ideas within the group. Okay, so I think that's probably a better way to go, so that there is less pressure on delivering at this exact moment. The links are within your chat, and I will send them again by email. And can we also send the link for the online certificates? Yeah, and so we also will provide the link now to receive your certificates for attendance. So thank you so much for joining us today. I hope it was an interesting session to learn what is happening in Australia as well. There are plenty of discussions about how to develop cultural tourism moving forward. And there are pressures on authenticity, on preserving the culture, on being entrepreneurs rather than employees, and developing new businesses. There are some support mechanisms, but that actually sometimes they're disjointed, and sometimes groups rely on them too much. And when funding runs out, the initiatives are not sustainable. So that's also one of the challenges. But there's generally an optimistic view of tourism development after COVID-19. And as speakers mentioned, there's a lot of interest from the domestic market in authentic cultural experiences. And to some extent, the pandemic actually pushed Australians to discover their backyard and learn about peoples and cultures living in Australia. And there are definitely more challenges as the world reopens and we see the changes in international travel. Will Australians still be interested in rediscovering the regions where they live, or they will move to long-haul destinations? That's something that we don't know about. And you can also see how tourism has connected with the natural environment in our region, as both Craig and Marcus mentioned the ranger programs and the reinvestment in redeveloping, really reestablishing the nature in places where they work, because it has been deteriorating over some time. And so through their businesses, they can help regenerate those natural environments, even though the benefits of the people of these communities in which they work seem to be dominant in the discussions. Okay. And also please fill in the evaluation survey, which Jenny has also shared with you. And please let us know if there are any questions.
Yeah. And we will also email the PowerPoint slides.
Yeah. So PowerPoint slides, feedback on the new regenerative tourism activity, and information about the next workshop will be shared with you. Actually, with the next workshop, I can tell you that it will be taking place on 13th of October, and it will be hosted by University Malaysia Sabah. And the focus of that workshop is on marketing. There will be 4 topics on discussion on contemporary thoughts on marketing, cultural tourism, local government role. So today we heard about the state government role, and in the next seminar we'll focus on the local government. Marketing cultural products pre and post COVID-19, which is a case study of the Changi designs. And also we'll talk about cultural tourism and local communities. So we'll see you next month in a couple of weeks. Thank you all for the ongoing support for our cultural tourism recovery program. Thank you. Yeah, we can stop the recording.